Welcome to Phantom Zone, the podcast where we dredge the lakes of hell in search of the worst the cinematic world has to offer, and then put it on trial for its various crimes against humanity. And should a film be found guilty, it will be jettisoned into the far, far reaches of space. A Phantom Zone, if you will. I'm your host, Adrian Torres, and joining me, as always, is my good Robo vampire friend, Scott Daly. How's it going, Scott?
I'm doing pretty good, Adrian. I am very excited to talk about the weirdest, worst movie I've ever seen.
Oh, there's plenty far worse, and mostly from the guy who made this film, basically. So, we watched. I don't know which title we're going to go by. I'm just going to say Devil's Dynamite. That's the basic one that you can find it under. This is one of those films that, depending upon the country, region, who's putting it out under what rights, has a different title. They're usually going to have Devil's Dynamite in there somewhere. That's the actual real title. You might see it like we did under Amazon Prime as Robo Vampire 2 Devil's Dynamite, and that's because it's made by Godfrey Ho. He's got an Americanized name that they actually put up. It's like Joseph Livingston or something like that. But it's Godfrey Ho who did it. And it's the reason it has that Robo Vampire 2 part is because he actually made another movie that was called Robo Vampire. And they both had kind of similar looking characters who were in the film. The difference between them is that Robo Vampire 2 was actually released in 1987, and Robo Vampire came out a year later. So, math doesn't really work. Sometimes the movies we watch, they can blend together. Half-remembered moments give way to events that never really transpired in movies that weren't even actually made. I find no better way to convey the madness that is Godfrey Ho than that type of experience. And imagine that last word that I used underlined twice. Experience. There isn't, a traditional view for movies when you're talking about a Godfrey Ho works. They're basically a roller coaster ride that's orchestrated by a madman. I didn't put two and two together initially when we said we were going to do this movie, as Ho's films don't exactly exist on a rational plane of reality. If you aren't really aware of his works, here's a primer. Godfrey Ho directed over 140 films, mostly featuring the word ninja in the title or a word to draw connection to another popular film at the time, like he did Ninja Force, Ninja Protector, Ninja Terminator, stuff that people could draw through line to, either because it had ninjas or because it had that tenuous connection to something that was big and popular. Again, when I emphasized experience a minute ago, I'm using the director in quotations, and that's because his MO was very different. And he usually used a cut and paste technique when it came to his movies. And what I mean by that is he would usually use the little bit of budget he had for a film to film like a handful of scenes. Those handful of scenes would then be spliced together with either other movies that he directed in past years or would be attached to films from foreign countries where the rights were kind of nebulous and he could just, stitch these movies together without worrying about being prosecuted in any way. And that's very much the feeling that this type of movie has. He'd go one step further and he'd himself decide that he was going to make an English audio dub on top of everything to try to bridge the insurmountable chasm that was two to three or four, depending upon the film's different storylines. And as you can expect, that doesn't really always work. And that leads us to Devil's Dynamite.
No, it does not. It does not work at all.
But does that help shed some light on things for you, Scott? Because I know that you weren't really familiar with him.
Yeah, I had never heard of this guy before, and I watched the movie before you told me about this cut and paste technique, and obviously that makes so much more sense. And it makes so much more sense that each and every scene in this movie seems completely disconnected from the other ones. I'm interested if you know which scenes were the ones he shot specifically for this movie. Because once you told me that, I was trying to think back of which I thought it was, and I couldn't tell.
The ninjas are usually the parts that is stuff that he did.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and that's usually like the connection that he does is if it has like the ninjas or the vampires, then that's usually something that he did himself. And you can kind of tell because a movie that I saw, it was about a month and a half ago, so it would have been the Video Vortex that was across the country 2 months ago, was Crocodile Fury, which is a movie that Godfrey Ho also did, where there's a main storyline that deals with a lady who controls drug trafficking and gambling and has 2 Chinese vampires that are by her side at all times. And then there's literally in like every scene that she's in, they just happen to be there.
It's just like every one of these movies is gambling, casinos, vampires, and ninjas.
But the second storyline in Crocodile Fury deals with an Indonesian village where there's crocodiles that are attacking a whole bunch of people. And this guy jumps into the water and is lovingly talking to this alligator who turns out is the reincarnation of his girlfriend. But that's an Indonesian movie that's then attached to a film that has like Australian or British actors and also has Chinese actors and everything. So the tones don't really match, and even the storyline that they try to connect that weaves it all together doesn't really work.
Yeah, that's putting it very conservatively.
Yeah, this is going to be a different type of episode.
Yeah,
it's going to be an experiment.
Like, it is impossible to walk through the plot of this movie. Like, because
we're going to try. There's going to be things that Scott got that I didn't get, and vice versa. And I apologize to Scott, and I said, "Hey, had I known that this was a Godfrey Ho film, I would have said let's do something else." So this is very much an exercise. At the same time, if you guys end up really liking the discussion that we have in our confusion or haze, whatever you want to call it, we're more than happy to do more Godfrey Ho films in the future, because there's at least another 40 films of his that are on Amazon Prime. So that's it's right there. Scott might bow out at a certain point, and that might be,
I might
the breaking tipping point.
I might get a little sick during this.
Yeah.
This, I mean, it's like the thing when you said the title of this movie to me, I was immediately in, because Robo Vampire 2 Devil's Dynamite sounds like the most amazing movie I've ever seen. And the poster is crazy for this movie. It's like blue ninjas with grenade launchers shooting down attack helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
And
RoboCop,
and there is RoboCop in it. Like, literally just like it looks like they just like cropped a picture of RoboCop and stuck him on the cover. None of that is in this movie.
Well, the blue vampires are.
Yes, but there's no helicopter. Nobody has a bazooka. This is blatant false advertising. So we didn't, like, honestly, when I first started up the movie, I thought like I had clicked on the wrong thing, because I was like, what is going on here?
Oh, do you mean you were confused by the guy who was throwing fire and then adding blood to a sword blade to throw fire?
Yeah, the guy who every single one of his actions is done like a kung fu move, even if he's just like moving stuff on a table.
Well, he could know kung fu. Okay. Arguably. He is a Taoist priest, after all. And all we ever hear him referred to as is priest for the entire movie.
Yeah, you're gonna have to supply all the names for the characters, because
I will try to do.
I did not pick up any of them. Well, because the thing about the dub of this is it's terrible.
Yes.
It is really hard to understand in a lot of places. It's not mixed properly, so the music is kind of louder than the volume of the voices.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
lots of lines are rushed.
Yeah, almost as if they're doing cheap dubbing and don't want to take time to.
You can tell that, and that's how the majority of his films are, and it has a charm to it. But if you're not knowing that going in, I mean,
I was completely blind on this, and I'm kind of glad I was, because this was a once in a lifetime cinematic experience for me. Like I will never go into a movie like this again, because like I started taking notes, and then I just realized I was writing what is going on over and over and over again, and I just gave up 20 minutes in.
And that's because you were confused by Kung Fu Bell style.
Yes. I was confused by just about everything. And like I said, I didn't know the cut and paste. So when we cut from that opening scene to another scene where we're talking about the King Gambler, and
Whoa, he's not initially called the King Gambler until like 20 minutes have gone by of him being on screen. And that's just one person calls it. But for the opening scene, to best explain it as well as we can, we've got a Taoist priest who is doing Kung Fu Bell style. Like, he literally has a bell, and he's doing karate moves at the same time.
Is that a real thing, or are you just using that phrase as if it's a real thing?
I'm just using it.
Is Kung Fu Bell style like an actual thing?
That's what it looks like. That's
it is, yeah.
What it looks like, correct? Okay, so
yeah, but you came off like so confident that this was like you said it like it was a real thing, and I'm like,
if you've watched plenty of kung fu movies, you know that there's a chance that there could be something like Kung Fu Bell style. Everything else has a style, so there's basically like a making noodle style. So yeah, Kung Fu Bell style probably exists. It's probably not what this guy's doing. And those people probably have an advocate group who's very mad at us right now. But first of all, I'm fine with that, because that means that we're reaching a whole new audience. So
I know. Is there like a whole like subgroup for these type of movies that we're going to blow up? Welcome to the podcast subgroup of people that like this shit.
We won't even try to give them a name because of the last name of the director. So moving on. We've got the Taoist priest, who's only referred to as priest, and then we've got an American like mob guy who we only see connected to the priest because they're very much in the movie that Godfrey Ho shot, and not the main feature that we're constantly seeing. Yeah, but the opening piece of dialogue I wrote down just because it set the tone for this movie, because the American guy goes, "Hey, priest, what are you up to?" And the priest goes, "I think someone's watching me." And then the guy goes, "Those vampires, they're our slaves. You got nothing to worry about." And I was just like, okay, well, we are off to the races 30 seconds into the film.
Oh my God.
These are Chinese vampires, just to let you know. And the only reason I say that is because that's a very identifiable look. They're dressed basically in old garb. I don't know exactly which dynasty, but we're talking about like a couple hundred years back is the way that they're dressed. And their skin is blue. They do have the fangs. They do leave bite marks on the neck, so they do have that part. They suck blood basically to get, more power. But they also have, if you put a piece of paper that's kind of like a talisman and has writing on it, then they're immobile. They're not going to hurt anybody whatsoever. If they lose that talisman, then they'll basically be acting like normal vampires, jumping around and causing problems for everybody.
Well, they also hop like bunnies.
That's what I was going to say. That's their main mode of transportation. That's a little bit different. They don't transform into bats or anything like that. They prefer to hop like fucking idiots.
But they can still do kung fu really well. They just can't walk.
But is it really kung fu? Because the majority of the time they just have their arms out in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair.
There's a couple times where they randomly are like blocking kung fu moves, and I'm like, maybe that's just reflexes on the actor's part, but doesn't work out for the majority of what's going on. We just basically get a feel of the vampires as they're, decide to eat some people who've been let in by the main characters. And it's just weird. There's not a lot to it, but you are finding out that there is a lady that's named Madame Mary, who's the head boss, and the American guy is working in cahoots with her, and he's trying to raise this vampire army to help their cause. You don't know exactly what the reason is, but they're going to help them out
to do crime things or something.
You guess. You're not sure.
I don't know.
We also learn about, in like the next couple scenes, a character named Stephen Cox, and you can't forget his name because of the fact that in this world, Stephen Cox is basically the soldier of this reality.
That's
everybody
a great
knows,
Snake Eater reference.
Yeah, everybody knows who Stephen Cox is. They know that he's the king of gamblers, and it's just how people end up, talking to him. If you don't actually know him, it's totally fine to go up and start a conversation and then stop and go, "Oh, you're Stephen Cox, king of the gamblers." That he's totally unfazed by it. He was in prison for 10 years. You don't know why. You never find out why he was in prison. All you know is that he was wronged by Madame Mary and sent to prison for 10 years. And now that he's out, he's going to exact his revenge.
Yeah, if you're the king of gambling and get sent to prison, are you the king of gambling?
Like, do you mean, does he retain his title while he's incarcerated?
No, I just mean, he made a gamble that he wouldn't go to prison, and he lost. So
I don't think that was ever...
I think he should get the title stripped from him, is what I'm saying.
I don't know. But the way we find out about him is basically because somebody, these ninjas, who are very much, again, part of the Godfrey host staple, go to this ramshackle prison and end up questioning a whole bunch of the inmates if they happen to know where Stephen Cox is. The brilliant thing about this is because they have their faces covered by their masks, when they did the the English audio dubbing, they decided to muffle people's mouths while they talked to make it more realistic. So it makes it incredibly difficult to hear what they're saying.
Yeah, which just makes it even... I mean, it was already hard to hear what they were saying, and that takes it to a whole new level. And I missed all this dialogue. So if there was any important plot elements happening during this, I did not understand it. Couldn't get it.
No, it wasn't, because they were basically asking if he was there, and then they just start stabbing everybody that's in the prison because they don't know where he is. And then they go outside, these ninjas, and then out of nowhere, the Chinese vampires show up and attack the ninjas who are part of the Shadow Warriors organization. And the two guys from the main scene are like, ha ha ha, we can add these guys to our army now. That's great. And then a guy comes out of nowhere and goes, "Boss, we lost Cox." And it ends the scene.
Everyone's looking for... I just realized what that sentence was going to sound like. Everyone's looking for Cox.
They are. Everybody. And we get a whole bunch of scenes of different cities across the country where everybody's hearing that Stephen Cox is out of jail, and different people are like, "Oh, he can finally get his revenge. Oh, the plan's being set in motion." Most of them are characters that we never see ever again, but it leads to one of my favorite moments of the film, in which there's a guy who's sitting at a table drinking tea, and a guy comes up to him and he's like, "Oh, did you hear? Stephen Cox has gotten out of prison." The guy goes, "He's finally done it." He sits there. This guy comes running up the stairs, and he's like, "Oh, are you such and such?" And he's like, "Oh, maybe I am." And he goes, "Oh, I came to ask you some questions about Stephen Cox." And he goes, "You really want to know?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "So, where do I begin?" Before he can tell anybody where he's going to begin and any information, vampire attack out of nowhere. basically saying, fuck your exposition dump.
Basically, I think the writers just didn't know where to go with this, and then
It's just,
got backed in a corner.
For them to be there. Like, there's no reason. There's no one that they're trying to get or anything like that. They just spring out of nowhere. And the guy who came to ask some questions disappears into thin air and is replaced by a man wearing tinfoil and a very cheap motorcycle helmet.
It kind of looks like the Mega Man helmet, except for tin instead of blue.
Kind of. I was going to say, for anybody who's an MST3K fan, he looks like Prince of Space. Scott might not get that reference, but anybody who is a fan will know exactly what I'm talking about, and it's how this guy looks. He's ridiculous. He doesn't look like he should be a crime fighter. That's the best way.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't.
He's also he's fighting some of the people, but then he stops in the middle of it, and the vampires are literally attacking everybody in this room, save for him and the guy that he was talking to 2 seconds earlier. And the guy who was going to give the exposition dump goes, Ronald's vampire army. And the superhero guy says, there's no such thing as vampires. Is there? And first of all, I'm like, they're right in fucking front of you. How can you say that they don't exist if you're witnessing vampires attacking people? And then the first guy goes, Taoist created them. And the superhero guy goes, that makes sense. And I'm like, what? Huh? What? And they're watching all these people just be killed. He's supposed to be a hero because of the way he's dressed up. He's not coming to any of the people's aid who are being turned into the vampires, or at least having their essence sucked out of them. And they're around the corner, and it's silent, and one of them goes, it stopped. And the guy goes, yeah, go check it out. And the other guy goes, all right. I'm like, yeah, no, of course. Yeah, if there's a room full of vampires and there's silence, the first thing I'm going to do is, it's totally okay. I should go check it out.
You're a hero, right?
Yeah.
Kind of.
They go to inspect the scene, and one of the guys goes, these are rather unusual bites. The bites that look like a vampire. The other guy goes, these vampires, they're going to be rather hard to beat. This conversation that's had isn't given by the people who it's supposed to be given by. The guy who mentions the unusual bites, he's the exposition guy who believes in vampires. The guy who says, these vampires are going to be tough to beat, is the guy who doesn't believe in vampires.
You're just thinking way too hard, Adrian. It doesn't matter. You're not supposed to be paying attention to who's saying what. It doesn't...
I'm paying attention because I'm trying to follow the through line.
I can't,
that I understand what's happening.
The answer is you can't. You cannot understand what's happening in this movie. You cannot. It is mindless nonsense from one scene to the next.
Oh, we do find out on his little journey or whatever. Stephen Cox decides that he's going to stop directly off at Madame Mary's place, the lady who wronged him 10 years ago. He goes straight to her place. He doesn't really seem like he has a plan, even though we've heard him say 5 different times already he has a plan. And his plan is apparently just to confront Mary and make her feel bad for what she did, the thing we never find out about. And their conversation is supposed to be banter, but it's somebody who's never participated in banter ever writing banter for two people. Because it feels think of the worst film noir movie, and it's 10 times worse than that.
Yeah, I don't even remember this conversation happening, so...
Well, yeah, because, she's upset downstairs, and you meet Louis, her boyfriend, who comes in, who's just overly polite, and he's like, are you okay? You've been acting strange and jumpy. And so she tells him, oh, yeah, sure, whatever, goes upstairs, and Stephen Cox is in her bed, and he's like, I just wanted to come by and see my house, because it's 10 years since I've seen my house, because you put me in jail 10 years ago. and she pulls a gun on him while he's talking, and the first thing he says, he goes, I remember that gun. I remember when I got you that gun 10 years ago.
I can't believe you paid enough attention. I don't remember this happening. I watched this movie 2.5 hours ago.
Oh, because he's just continually mentioning 10 years the whole time, and she's just, what wants him to get out of the place and everything. And so Louis ends up coming in upstairs and has another gun pointed at him and everything, and just says, "Who are you?" And Stephen Cox literally looks at the guy and goes, "I'm Steve Cox. She'll inform you of the rest." And then the scene ends directly after that.
Louis is the only person on planet Earth who has not heard of Stephen Cox.
He's the only person. He doesn't really care whatsoever. Steve Cox, of course, he's supposed to be wounded, but you never see it. Like, the next scene directly after he's had this, he's gambling money at one of Mary's establishments to, I guess, piss her off, because she riles up the guards come over, and he ends up beating them all up. It's a giant fight. It's ridiculous. The guy who was in the fight scene earlier, who's the exposition guy, comes up and ends up meeting up with him because they're old buddies, and he says, "I see your gambling skills are still just as good." Which I guess if you go away for 10 years, apparently your gambling skills become rusty or you lose a step. And then we're informed that Madame Mary and Stephen Cox used to be an item. They were together. But you get, like, the way the dialogue is already confusing, and they confuse it even more because they say that they were together, but then they mention that he got a divorce and his kid was taken away from him. So you're led to believe that Madame Mary is the one that he was married to and took his kid, but there's never a kid scene in the entire goddamn movie.
Yeah, well, because they probably added the whole kid thing in the dialogue, and there was no actual footage of a child, so they couldn't use it.
We end up getting a fight scene outside that's very hard to see. For a second, I thought that I'd accidentally hit a button and switched over to Netflix and was watching one of their Marvel series, because sure enough, it takes place in an alleyway.
Burn.
This very, very dark, hard to see fight. But it's like that's what the movie's supposed to be sold on, is the action. And the fact that they have this giant, 5-minute action sequence where you can see literally nothing for the majority of it.
Yeah. It's really dark. I could not tell what was going on.
Out of all the things that you're going to splice together in this movie, that's one that even Godfrey Ho should be like, oh, maybe this is, 3 minutes that I don't have to add.
Maybe we should just leave this one on the cutting room floor, because we can't tell what's going on.
Yes. And there's so many times that he jumps to things that are basically, just to waste time. Like, he goes from this and goes back to the Taoist priest who's doing Bell-style kung fu with, his vampires. Like, he's doing it acting like he's sparring with them, but it just looks like he's just fucking around with them.
Yeah, and, the bell makes them, look in random different directions. It's not very clear what the bell is actually doing to the vampires. It's doing something. And then they just cut back. Yeah. But,
they cut back. They don't even have anybody talk in the scene. They just have the Kung Fu Bell style, and then it's done. We get a scene at Mary's birthday party, in which we find out that this guy, who the shades guy, that's just what I'm calling, because he wears shades the entire movie, and stands up to make an announcement and says, Mary and a police colleague, Louis, they're going to get married. They're great kids. And I'm just like, oh, okay, that's great that it's her birthday party, and this random guy is going to make their wedding announcement for them. Okay. That's also how we learned that Louis is a police officer, something that plays absolutely no importance in the movie whatsoever.
Yeah, especially considering Mary's an underworld gangster, leader of the entire underworld.
Which Louis has no idea.
No clue. Louis is the worst cop ever.
completely oblivious to this. Not to mention that he doesn't question at all why at her birthday party they happen to have gambling set up in one side of the room. Gambling where it turns out the people who are running the gambling are actually cheating the people out of their money. But thank goodness Steve Cox happens to be there, king of gamblers, and he can spot a cheater from a mile away.
Yeah, but isn't that helping Mary? Like, I don't understand what he's doing.
No, he doesn't. Like, there's no explanation why the gambling's there. You think it has to do with the underworld dealing. No comments made on it whatsoever. Instead, he waltzes over and directly confronts Mary on if she has any connection, like why they're there. And she's just like, yeah, that's a thing. They dance really awkwardly, and Louis' butthurt, and so he decides to butt in and dance. And it's just like it's weird. And I actually wrote the note that I said, what's going on? Cox wants revenge, but he's just constantly annoyed and mentions he has a secret weapon that's going to kill the vampires. Just out of nowhere, mentions to Mary, hey, I've got a secret weapon to defeat your vampires that I know that you're going to send to kill me.
So, do we ever learn what that is? Is it supposed to be the Robo Man? Like,
I don't know. It might be, but we never find out because there's never a time that he directly confronts the vampires. Well, the vampires aren't part of his story because he's not in the same movie as them.
Almost as if it's a completely different movie that doesn't have vampires in it.
Yes. And that's when we see the hopping, laughing ninja vampires. Because, of course, that elite squad earlier in the movie got turned into the vampires, and they're hopping around. We get more fights with the tinfoil Prince of Space, who literally disappears into thin air and then comes back as the guy. It's not like he spins around and changes a costume. Like,
no.
There's a puff of smoke. There's no body or person there, and then all of a sudden, the tinfoil guy appears. They don't call him by any special name, so this is just that guy.
Is this the part where we're introduced to the two children who we see
directly after this? Yes,
we see twice, who have no bearing on anything ever.
My favorite scene in the entire fucking movie. This is the ray of sunshine here. We're not going to come back to it. I don't care because we've already talked way too long about this movie. That's insane to try to describe. I feel like I'm losing my mind in the process of explaining this.
Yeah,
to you.
and to the people listening that haven't seen this movie, Adrian is revealing things to me as I go. I watched this movie and he's saying stuff, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't.
This is why I took notes on it because I'm like, this is going to be a chore right away. So we have these kids who are playing basically, Chinese vampire. But the way it starts out with them playing is they have a girl who's blindfolded and she's doing a Marco Polo type situation with her hands out. At the same time she's doing that, there's a kid who's dressed as one of the Chinese vampires who is scaring other children while this girl's playing this game. In the middle of them playing this game comes the tinfoil superhero and the vampires, and there's a giant fight that occurs. Once the fight is done, the boy peeks his head up and looks around, so does the girl, and the boy says, they're all gone, so you can go. And the girl says, okay, I'm leaving. All of a sudden the music gets very quiet, very slow, sad strings, slow motion, as the girl starts to walk away, gets to the frame of the doorway, fog appears out of nowhere, and she disappears. not in a puff of smoke, just disappears like she's a ghost. And the kid who watched all this happen scratched his head. And I thought to myself, I know exactly how you fucking feel, kid.
Never explained. In fact, we see her in another scene, so it's not like she vanished forever.
We see her in another scene where she's dressed up like one of the little Chinese vampires.
Yeah. But, like, this... Oh, I can't, like... First of all, it's daylight, so yes. They're, like, not using vampires correctly. But there's no explanation for why any of them are here. There's just two children playing, and then there's a fight, and then we just end the scene. It doesn't relate to anything, and we go back to it as if it's important enough that we have to do this twice. Because the scene basically plays out exactly the same next time. It's the little kid scaring the girl, and then the vampires come, and then the guy's there, but not in costume this time, and the kid recognizes him even though he's not in costume. But then he changes in costume, and then the kid said, "Are you really that guy?" And it's like, you just said that you...
He puts his finger to his mouth and then spins around and de-transforms.
Like, oh my god.
I don't know.
It's just nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. He's described it at one point as he's that damn futuristic warrior. and that's not taking place in the story where the futuristic warriors. Futuristic warrior is in the story with the vampires. He's not in the story where you see Stephen Cox. In the Stephen Cox stories where they make that comment about, oh yeah, that's that damn futuristic warrior. And it's like, no, you've never seen him. You know nothing about this guy, who's first of all completely incompetent and not very good at his job.
Hey, Adrian, who's the protagonist of this movie?
There isn't one.
There you go.
I'll just come out and say it. I mean, the closest thing is Stephen Cox, who I would want to see the full Stephen Cox movie, like in the way it actually is supposed to be with subtitles, because like it's shot completely differently. There's style at points out the wazoo that feels so weird when you're intercutting it with another movie, because you're losing so much. And this movie is smack dab full of so many smash cuts that occur while someone's in the middle of a fucking sentence.
Yeah. I mean, like, the editing is frantic and absurd, and you're absolutely right that like the biggest problem with this cut and paste technique is movies have a look to them, a style, a tone. They usually color them in a certain way, they light them in a certain way, and when you take two movies that all of this stuff is different and just smush them together, it's nonsense.
Yeah. And in the Stephen Cox story, the reason why people are trying to get to him or find out where he is because 10 years ago when he went to prison, he ended up hiding all his gold. So
Mary we shift to a pirate movie now.
Yes, we have a whole bunch of Mary's henchmen who are out searching for that gold. And one night while they're doing this, they have a guy who ends up getting his leg trapped in the hole where they were digging, and the cops show up, so they decide to shoot him in the head. We cut directly. Yeah, we cut directly from that moment to Stephen Cox escorting the guy who was trying to steal his gold and was killed, taking his sister and family and moving them into his house because he's worried that they're going to try to kill her family now.
I don't know what to say. That's like, we've been doing this. This is like I think our 23rd episode. I feel completely ill-equipped to talk about this movie at all because
we're getting to some great scenes. That are supposed to set elements up, and but it shows what happens when you break up the harmony of a film by this, because there's several things that are between this moment where he's taking these people into the house and the next direct scene, which shows him on the beach where Mary is, dressed in a fucking cool outfit, by the way. The all white suit that he's wearing. No,
he looks really cool here.
He's badass, and he basically goes straight up to Mary while on the beach and accuses her of all the shit that she's been doing. And I got to get a video clip of him just completely flying off the handles all of a sudden because he's trying to talk to her and she makes an accusatory remark and he just goes, "You bitch!" and just lunges at her, like jumps across the sand to try to attack her out of nowhere.
And Louis just kind of like there, right? Like he's just standing there.
He's there and he watches it and then he decides that he's gonna, like, when Steve Cox jumps on Madame Mary and calls her a bitch, that's when Louis is like, "Whoa, hey man, if you want to fight, you can fight me. Let's get in a fight. And he pushes him back. And all of a sudden, Stephen Cox gets like strangely doesn't want to be involved with it. And like they've got sad music going on, like the sad walking away music from Incredible Hulk is the best way to describe it. And like he's so slowly backing down, and Louis like, yeah, that's right. I didn't think that you were going to do it, you coward. And all of a sudden, the way I'm reading the scene, you know, for watching a ton of movies for years and years and years, I'm like, oh man, they're going to reveal something weird where it turns out that Louis is actually Stephen Cox's kid.
Oh my God.
And that's the reason why he's not going to fight him. Because like that's the way they're setting it up with the music and everything. And you've never met this guy's mom, and why Stephen Cox seems to be weird around Louis compared to everybody else. Of course, it doesn't amount to anything, but I'm just like, but the way they're framing it makes it feel like it's going to be that way.
Yeah, I could see that. That would be insane. I would not be surprised if the movie did that.
It would have been great. Like I would want to see the original movie and find out that happened. And it's just, you don't get that. You get all these weird conversations going on because everything's smashing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there's then a scene of people who are kidnapping a kid who I think maybe is supposed to be Steve's kid, but we don't really find out why they're trying to kidnap this kid. But the people who are kidnapping this kid get outside, and their getaway car is set on fire. But then the scene ends, so you never find out what happened in the kidnapping.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
And that leads us to finding out that the tinfoil guy knows about the Taoist priest's connection to the vampires. That just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, but I guess that goes somewhere. I guess that's how he learns how to defeat them eventually. But it.
But I mean, this is where it's getting really confusing, because they're taking stuff from the Stephen Cox story, like they're not going back to it as much, and they're focusing more so on the vampire side of things, but they're not really having like much explanation of what's going on, and they're not really wanting to fill in the gaps or anything. Yeah.
It's nonsense. Like that. I mean, that's just what it is. It's nonsense. And when the scene when this is about the time that Stephen Cox gets captured, right, or kidnapped and tortured for the location of the gold.
Yes.
This is my favorite scene because they threaten to kill him if he doesn't say where the gold is, and he doesn't care about that.
No.
Then they try to convince him that if they show him where the gold is, they will help break up the marriage between Mary and Louis.
Which is tomorrow, by the way. Now,
which is tomorrow.
You have no idea how much time has passed in this movie whatsoever, but magically the wedding's tomorrow.
Yeah, which makes no sense because these are henchmen hired by Mary. So why they would do that doesn't make any sense. And then when Stephen Cox like says no, he doesn't want to do that because he respects Louis or something, then they say, well, if you don't show us where the gold is, we're going to kill Louis. Again, this is the fiance of the woman that hired them to do this. And now, like it's, and that works because then he goes and shows them the gold, and it's just like, oh my God,
like, they've got the fight to the death.
Yeah, because like they find the gold
between the two members. That's my favorite part. They're basically they force two guys to fight to the death just because.
Well, it's amazing because they find the gold. And Stephen Cox like then tries to manipulate them into fighting each other. It's like they're here to kill you, you know. And the guy goes, I know what you're doing. But then 30 seconds later, it works.
It works. And then there's the phone conversation that I love with where Louis has the call that he gets at the wedding.
Yeah.
And magically from across the room, Mary walks over, grabs the phone, and was somehow able to hear the conversation that was going on because she picks up the phone and continues in stride with the conversation that's already happening.
It's almost as if when you're just dubbing over dialogue, you can do whatever you want.
Oh my God. And then we got more ninja vampires.
Yeah, just I mean, and there's nothing like
the best way to explain it.
They're just fighting, and the kung fu here is not bad. Like it's
no,
like there's some talented guys fighting here. I think like it's not horribly shot either. Like it's good, but it's just like everything around it is terrible.
You got the mind control too. Don't forget about the mind control.
Of course, the mind control. Of course.
It's just I can't even explain it because the movie's just like, hey, there's mind control now. At this point, you're just like, fuck it, okay, well, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, we're just tossing shit into this movie because robots and vampires were not enough. We got to have mind control. We got to have gold. The Taoist fight at the end is the most amazing part to me because they're fighting against each other, but they exist in separate movies. Yes. So they have to be fighting against each other from across space. Like they're just in their own rooms fighting against each other. And it's so amazing.
It's just, and this is trying to cut back with the Stephen Cox story. And then you have, I just watched this like an hour ago and yet.
No, it fades from your mind. Like, it's like it's like I never watched this movie.
Well, yeah. Well, there's so much that's vivid, but the part that I'm still not entirely sure about everything is the whole fire.
Well, because like, so yeah, like Stephen Cox sneaks in, kills Mary. He just kills her.
Just kills her. Just straight up fucking kills her out of nowhere. He's been toying with her the whole time, basically, making not sure. Like, he wanted her to feel bad. Basically, that's what it, because he says early on that he wants justice. He wants justice for what she did to him. Again, that thing that we don't know why he got sent to prison. We just know that it's been for decades, and then he was just able to get out one day.
Right. Yeah.
And
we're not clear if his sentence was up or he escaped or like we don't know, but he's out of prison and he wants justice. So he fucks with her for a few days, breaks into her wedding and murders her. So that's our person who we think is supposed to be the protagonist there.
Yeah. But I can't remember how the fire started.
Well, the police started it. The police show up.
They did start it.
He's in there with hostages, and they're like, we got to get him out of here. Let's smoke him out. So they light the fucking place on fire.
Yeah, it's not smoking him out. Like, we're talking about a giant raging fire, which Louis comes in, and has the conversation trying to talk Steve Cox down because, Louis is supposed to be the good guy in the end. He's actually the person who should be the lead because he's the most decent person who's not morally corrupt, and even like he feels genuinely bad when he finds out that she's, the underworld kingpin. Like, he doesn't want to believe it. Like, he's genuinely hurt and it's just like, no, there's no possible way that's happening. But, he's pleading with Stephen Cox, not wanting him to basically, give up his life, even though the guy just murdered his wife. And he even makes sure, to say to him, he goes, Mary said that she really changed in the time. And you're like, well, that's, I'm not sure if I buy that, but that's still sweet. That's the thing that you want to mention to him, to try to make it seem like, she felt sorry for what she did.
Yeah. I mean, she obviously didn't, since she hired people to kidnap him and threaten to murder him to get his gold.
But Louis is still not really privy to that, so he's taking it at face value. And Steve can see that Louis is not a bad guy, so he just turns Louis around and throws him out of the building to save him. And the fire rages on, and then it just says, the end. The
end. So we're assuming Stephen Cox died.
Oh, he's totally dead. Yeah. He's totally dead.
So the police murdered him.
Exactly. And probably like several of the hostages who weren't able to get out.
Right. Like there were people in there.
There were people in there and they never show them. Like, they go from showing the people to Stephen Cox having the conversation with Louis. So all those hostages probably died. We're safe to make that bet.
Oh, also there were vampires in this movie.
But they existed on like a different plane.
Yeah.
Like,
they were just this looming threat in the background that like, oh no, Mary's going to use her vampires to take over the world.
And like the thing that we're trying to press upon that's hard without seeing it is when it alternates from scene to scene. Sometimes the scenes can be 30 seconds long. Sometimes they can be 10 minutes long. It varies. And that's what's so weird and throws off like a normal syncopation of the movie is there's times that you've got two scenes in a row that are maybe 30 seconds each with Stephen Cox. And then you go back to the vampires for 7 minutes. And then you've got 15 minutes of Stephen Cox. And then you've got a minute of the vampires. And just the way that they handle it and the way that they shuffle it about just keeps on throwing you off balance. And there's plenty that's you're able to watch and be entertained by. But like sitting it down and doing it in the way that we normally do kind of does a disservice to a movie like this because you're not really going into the right frame of mind because you're wanting to judge this movie. And because we do have that parameters of saying, this is a movie that we want to judge for the things it does wrong isn't entirely indicative or fair to something that Godfrey Ho is doing because he's not making, a traditional movie. He's not making a movie that he completely did.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. There's something really interesting about the idea of taking two films and trying to splice them together to create a new story. There was a documentary I saw at Fantastic Fest last year. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a director who took like home video footage he found. Like there was this guy who was like obsessed with taking video.
Oh
footage.
The documentary.
Yeah.
Wasn't it called Fraud?
Yeah, it was called Fraud. You're right. Yeah. So it's like this guy just like was obsessive with like taking all this home movie footage and he posted it all on YouTube. So this director took all this footage and using this real life footage of a family crafted this narrative about this woman having like uncontrollable spending problems and commits like insurance fraud. They burn down their house. And
they burn down their house. They get rid of their IDs. And
then they run to Canada. And it's like it took all this real footage and then it like spliced in some like insert shots of like computer screens like just to show the but like it was this really, really fascinating idea and I liked it a lot. So like on the surface, this idea of cutting and pasting two movies together is really interesting, but it feels just so lazily done here. Like it just like instead of trying to craft a new story out of these two stories, it just told two stories and then lazily tried to connect them together in some nonsense way. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, plus the way that he was doing these, like how quick he got them out. If you look between like the early 80s to like the early 90s, you put out probably like 50 to 60 movies. We're talking about like 6 or 7 a year, depending upon the year. So of course there's going to be more misses than there are hits for the way that he's putting these together. But it's still fascinating to try to see like what they decided to leave in from the movies, how they tried to build a narrative out of it all, and it doesn't work. But you're also watching, you're just like, this is fucking insane. I kind of want to see more of these.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to watch the two movies. And do you know what they're titled? Do you know what they are?
Which one?
The movies that he used for this? Yeah.
I don't know, and because the way it exists with his is there are no movies technically for the footage that he did. Like I think there's maybe like 4 to 5 movies out of everything that he's directed where the movie was entirely his shot from beginning to end. And otherwise, like his portion that he did for Devil's Dynamite isn't a full movie.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Like
the Steve Cox film, I don't know like what the actual character's name is originally. I mean, we can do some looking on the internet and we'll post a link if we're able to find anything. But that movie exists in some way. The one with the part with the Chinese vampires and the tinfoil man, that I believe was stuff that he filmed and doesn't really have a movie. Just like the Crocodile Fury movie I mentioned, there is an Indonesian alligator film that makes up the basis of it, and then the stuff that he does with the witch lady and the 2 Chinese vampires was stuff that he shot. So, half those movies don't have it.
Yeah. And I kind of do want to watch more of these because I want to see if maybe this is just a particularly bad example, because I think, like I said, there's something inherently fascinating about this as like just a film project, to see how you can do this. But this is bad. Like there's nothing redeeming about this film. There's no part of it that I felt connected to any of the characters or anything that was happening. Like it's 90 minutes long and it felt like an eternity.
Yeah. I think that's just, I don't know how many other movies he made this year, when this one was put out, which was 88, I believe 87 or 88. But I think if you make several of these, then there's a chance that over time it's going to, there's going to be certain ones that don't really work. And so I'd be interested to see if there was any that he put out in this year that were some of his more well-known ones. Like I said, the couple that I mentioned at the beginning were his bigger titles. If it's got ninja in the title, those are considered some of his better ones. The main one that everybody comes back to, even though it's not great by any means, is Ninja Terminator. So I'm interested to see that one, which is on Prime.
Yeah, I might check it out eventually. Not anytime soon. I need a break from this. But yeah, I guess like we're doing sequels right now, and we picked this because it had a 2 in the title. This is not related to the first Robo Ninja, Robo Vampire at all, other than the fact that it has a robot and vampires in it. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that I hated this movie. I certainly think that's too strong of a word, but it was not a fun experience.
Okay, so what would you vote it then?
I'm going to say guilty on this one.
Okay.
I just think like it feels lazy. It feels rushed. It feels like there's no real passion behind it. And like, again, this kind of project is interesting to me. If you take time with it, I think you can craft something truly unique and different by doing this. But this is not it.
Not to be contrarian, but just because of the fact that we are curious in other ones of these, to have the possibility of finding one of the ones that's considered better by his standards or the top of his craft, or even the potential to further down the line, maybe we'll do a double episode where we do like one of his best ones, and then also one of the few handful of films that he did from beginning to end, to have a movie like that to judge him by is why I'm going to say not guilty, to have that chance.
Well, I didn't think we were going to launch Godfrey Ho into the Phantom Zone. I was just talking about this movie specifically.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean that's part of our caveat that we have, that if it does get a guilty and we are launching it in there, it's basically we're not coming back to that film or the films of that ilk.
Well, if that's the case, then I'll change mine, because I don't want this movie to exist anymore, but I am very interested in this type of film. And exactly. So if saying guilty means we don't get to do any more of those, then that's not what I want. So
yeah, that's why I have to say not guilty, because I'm curious to see what people consider to be his pinnacle of the cut and paste technique, and what a Godfrey Ho film looks like that he completely has done. Because if we see a movie that's totally his vision and it's absolute dog shit, then yeah, we can feel better about completely sending it off there and having Godfrey Ho go in general. But there's something to the amount that he's done that you hope out of 142 films that you strike gold once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, you would think so. We didn't mention that he goes by pseudonyms a lot in his movies.
Oh, a whole bunch.
And in this one, it was Joe Livingstone, not Joe Livingston, which is usually.
Stun. Sorry, that was my bad. That's what I said.
Oh, you said Stun? Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Stone. It's Stone. It's perfect.
Stone.
I love it.
Stone.
But he's got I think
like
40.
Charles Lee.
I think he's got like 40 different pseudonyms, and I think he does it. Like I think this was specific to the American dub of the movie because he wanted to like create an American sounding name, so it was like Joe Livingstone.
Yeah, that's all he does is the American dubs. Like that's what's even crazier because he's not American. He didn't originally like he became an American and everything, but that wasn't his background. When he was starting out in films and everything, it wasn't. In America, like that was something that he adopted partly because of when he was coming up and making his way in movies was the heyday of having, the 80s and 90s, the video stores and having the boom of VHS and everything. And so that straight to store market was huge. And by doing the cut and paste technique that he did, he was able to make movies really cheap and then get them into stores to unsuspecting people and then, make a quick buck that way.
Yeah. Here's some of his other names. We have Bruce Lambert. We have
Charles Lee.
Chester Yang. There is a Charles Lee. There's a Willis Chan, a Christ Hannah, Tommy Chung, there's Joe Livingstone. Victor Sears.
Ooh.
Bert Peterson. And there's some more, but it's very Godfrey Hall. The last movie he did was in 2000 called Manhattan Chase, and that was as Godfrey Hall.
And that's a Cynthia Rathrock film. I think that's one of the few that he did that was completely 100% his, and that one I do know it's on Amazon Prime, so we might have to do that in a couple months. But you're safe.
I'm gonna need a break. I'm gonna need some time away from this before we come back.
Well, I'm sorry to hear you say that you're gonna need a break because next week is not gonna be forgiving. Before we do the last little bit, we will let you guys know in case you want to join in on the fun. We are going to be watching Max 2. Which is a sequel to the very popular film Max, that was based on the true story of a what are they called? They're not service dogs, but are they?
It was an army. Yeah, an
army canine, and just about their story and everything. And then they made a sequel that's basically the antithesis of every late 90s, early aughts Disney direct-to-video film, because Max, after serving his country and everything, ends up working in the White House and being the best friend to the first kid, basically. And the first kid and their friend, who I think is Russian, have to help Max stop a plot from overthrowing the White House.
Yeah, so that's
what we chose. It's a movie that I've not heard any good thing about whatsoever. And a friend of Scott and mine on Twitter last week tweeted that his wife made him turn off the movie because it was so fucking terrible.
I can't wait. This is one we actually have to rent because it's new.
Yes. I know. I'm going to have to spend $1 at Redbox. If it doesn't come into the library. I do have a hold at the library. It just hasn't come back, which makes me a little bit worried because the movie's technically overdue. Like they told me, the library's like, yeah, this person.
They were just really
their rental's up, and it's like, how many times is this person watching?
They don't want to give it back. They want to give it back.
I really hope it's Godfrey Ho. He's working on another project, and he's going to splice Max 2 into something.
That would be amazing. That would be so amazing.
Scott, where can we find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter at ScottDaily85. That's DALY. And you can also see all the other podcasts I do at dailyplanetfilms.com.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at Adrian Torres. You can also find my writing online on Boom Howdy. Don't have anything going on at the moment on there this week. I'm trying to get around to doing a Transformers review. Transformers 5, surprisingly, was not screened in Kansas City whatsoever, so I had to be completely insane and go to 11:15 p.m. showing on Tuesday. If I write one, it's going to be very short because the movie's more painful to me than this movie that we watched.
I am trying to write a review of that movie too, and it is hard. Like you could describe a scene in that movie and you would not believe me. Like the things that happen in this movie are like Michael Bay has gone insane.
Like, and it's not even like necessarily bad. It's like you're just trying to like chart things that happen in the movie, and you're like, I'm clearly like leaving something out here, right? And it doesn't have the excuse of Godfrey Ho, where it's like, hey, we've got two movies we're putting, together. It just has one movie where they just had lapse in logic, but it does make sense with the fact that Michael Bay said that there were 14 more stories that they were working on in the writer's room, and that's because this movie feels like there's at least 7 different stories.
Yeah, I will say that Anthony Hopkins is having the time of his life. Like he could have like turned in like a cheap like just cash grab performance, but he goes into this character and he is having a good time, and he's my favorite part of the movie.
Cannot say the same for Mr. Mark Wahlberg.
No. Oh my God, no.
No. Mr. Mark Wahlberg's hair does more acting than he does. Just to give you a quick little snippet, because I know that Scott will probably agree with this. It's technically spoilers, not really, because I'm not going into anything at all, and it's nothing that you haven't seen in the trailers. Optimus Prime in the movie that's 2 hours and 35 minutes long is only probably in about 25 minutes of the film.
Yeah, and the movie really tried to build up the Optimus Prime is the bad guy this time, and he's going to fight Bumblebee. Let's
put it this way: we won't have the giant discussion on it because I know it'll make Scott and I mad. The first time when we see Optimus Prime is you hear his recording where, he's saying, this is Optimus Prime and this is my message to my makers. I'm coming to get you. We hear this when he's frozen floating through space. So you're like, well done, Prime.
Perfect.
Clearly, your plan's great.
You did a great job.
Failed at the beginning of this movie. Then the movie decides to wait like 30 minutes till cutting back from him when he gets taken aboard the ship by the little floating lady that you see in the trailer, and she turns him evil. They wait another about 20-30 minutes to come back to him, and she says, yeah, we need to go to Earth and get this thing so that I can become all powerful. Then the movie waits another 20-30 minutes, has him land on Earth, get into a fight with a whole bunch of people. Literally 5 minutes goes by, and something happens that makes him go, oh, well, shit, I shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry. And everybody's like, it's okay, Prime. Come help us. Prime goes, hold on. I got to do something. Fucks off for another 20 minutes. Characters in the movie literally say, where's Prime? I thought he was coming. And everybody says, wait, hold on. He's going to be coming. 10 minutes later, he shows up, swoops in to do something cool for 5 minutes. And then the movie's done.
There's literally a point in this movie where someone asks another character, how did you get here? And their response is, I don't know.
Don't know. That's just like, there's a famous moment, or it's become a famous moment on the internet, on Twitter, and you can find several people mention it. There's a point where Mark Wahlberg's character comes running up to everybody else and says, oh, you guys got my message. And everybody online's like, what message? And it's true. There's no point in the film where he contacts these other characters to come to his aid.
I can't believe I miss Shia LaBeouf. He was so much better in these movies than Mark Wahlberg.
We haven't even touched upon fake Tyrese, who's in the film.
Oh my God! Like,
because they of course Tyrese was in the first 2 movies. He was alongside Josh Duhamel, and they bring back Josh Duhamel in this movie as well. And there's a character that you see who's part of like, you know, the army squad or whatever, who is a bald-headed black man, and there's a whole bunch of different shots where he looks like Tyrese, but they make sure to let you know that he's not Tyrese because he has a giant goatee.
This movie,
I was like, you couldn't bring back Tyrese, but you had to have like the second in command to him be somebody who looks a lot like Tyrese.
Here's the thing though, Adrian. I kind of loved it. Like it's overlong, it's boring, it's bad. It fascinates me. The decisions made in this movie, like the entire Transformers franchise fascinates me because the decisions made in this movie are mind-boggling. You listen to Michael Bay talk about Optimus Prime and how he's this like perfect example and representation of self-sacrificing and good and noble. And then you watch the movies and like the secret of Transformers is Optimus Prime is the bad guy. Like he is cruel and terrible and he like kills people, like anyone who disagrees with him. Like there's a line in the fourth movie where he frees the Dinobots and then says, "You're free now. You can do whatever you want. Join us or die." And like that, what?
The secret of the Transformers series is that I don't care about a fucking thing in them. Everyone could die, and I wouldn't give a shit.
They fascinate me. I will always watch a new Transformers movie.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah, we've been going on for like 7 minutes about Transformers.
If you see this movie, what I ask of you, because you wasted your money, but it's okay. I did too. I used a little T-Mobile coupon, so it was only $4 to see a ticket that would normally be $16. So I don't feel terribly bad.
It was Taco Tuesday at the Draft House, so I only paid $5.
The movie has probably the worst stinger of all time because it insults the audience. It's literally only about 2 to 3 minutes into the credits, but it's probably one of the worst things ever that completely insults the audience because it's something that's never been mentioned in the movie whatsoever and presents it like it's a very cool reveal. That's all I can say. I hate this series. Well, anyways, Max 2 next week.
Max 2. Go watch Max 2 or don't. We're gonna. I'm sorry.
Join in on the fun. That's all I gotta say. Until next time, you guys, take care. Place, baby. So